Hello my friends, today we are going to the large-scale cattle farms in Australia to see how the process of raising millions of cattle here happens. According to statistics, at the beginning of 2022, in Australia there are about 19,000 beef cattle farms and about 4,500 farms producing a mixture of beef and sheep. The most popular breeds of cattle raised in Australia can be mentioned as Brahman, Hereford, Angus, or Murray Grey. Currently, the majority of cattle ranches in Australia are concentrated in states such as Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, and Western Australia. The average area of a cattle farm in this country is about 32,000 acres. Cattle were brought to Australia by the first British settlers in 1788. Herds grew slowly during the early years of settlement. By the 1800s, however, Australian farmers had taken advantage of the vast land and moved their herds to grazing areas further inland, thereby increasing herd numbers. In recent years, the number of calves born in Australia has fluctuated between 9.5 and 9.8 million a year, and 45% of them are born in Queensland. Most calves will live with their mothers on the farm for about 3 months before weaning. For cows that do not have the necessary amount of milk, the calves will be separated from their mothers earlier, and they will be fed milk provided by the breeders. This is a cattle farm in the state of New South Wales, where about 230 3-month-old calves are being cared for. Every day, the workers at this farm will use hay to feed the calves. Currently, the average size of a herd of cattle in southern Australia is about 430 heads, and in the north, the average herd size is around 1,600 heads. After about 4 months, the calves will be regularly grazed in the pastures. However, at this stage, they will not be moved too far from the farm like other adult cattle, because most of the food they use every day is still provided by the breeders. Every day, the mature cattle will be herded to the large pastures to feed, and to be able to move the livestock stably, the cattle breeders will need the help of cattle dogs. For a herd of about 500 cattle, they can travel about 15 miles a day to reach the new pastures. Currently, the total area of land used for grazing in Australia is approximately 831 million acres, which also includes areas used for grazing goats and sheep. After a long journey, herds will need to be fed before moving on to new pastures. At this time, dry grass and straw will be used to refuel for the next journey. The length of time a herd of cattle will feed on one pasture before moving to another will depend on a number of fundamental factors, such as the number of cattle in the herd, the size of the pasture, and the resiliency of the pasture. This is a herd in Queensland with about 350 heads. Every late afternoon, hundreds of cattle will gather at this small lake area to drink water. On average, an adult cattle needs to drink about 10 to 15 gallons of water per day, and afternoons are usually the time when their bodies need to be rehydrated. Currently, there are about 11,000 beef cattle farms in Queensland, with about 10.7 million heads, and annual beef production in the state is about 1.3 million tonnes. In Australia, moving a herd of cattle from a few dozen to a few hundred always requires the help of cattle dogs. Cattle dogs and sheep dogs are very intelligent animals and loyal to their owners. It is estimated that currently there are about 273,000 dogs working on animal farms in Australia, and about 65% of them are working on cattle farms. Training a cattle dog to master the skill and absolutely obey the owner is something that not all cattle owners can do. As a result, many ranchers buy pre-trained dogs to work on their farms. This is the process of moving a large herd in Victoria. Here, hundreds of cattle will be gathered in a fenced area before they are transferred to beef factories or sold to other farms. Gathering a herd of up to 100 cattle is not an easy thing for herders. This is a much harder job than moving livestock from one pasture to another. These helicopters will be used to prevent any cows from escaping. In 2022, the number of cattle in Australia is 24.7 million heads, and this number includes both dairy and beef cattle. In addition to Queensland, New South Wales is also one of the states with the largest number of cattle in the country, with 4.4 million heads. Behind these two states is Victoria with 3.6 million heads. Here's what's going on inside a beef factory in Australia. Each year, about 8.3 million cows are slaughtered in Australia, and annual beef production in the country ranges from 2.3 to 2.7 million tonnes. Currently, up to 70% of beef production in Australia is exported to other countries, and the remaining 30% is consumed domestically. Because the majority of cattle in Australia are raised on grazing, the quality of beef in Australia is always highly appreciated by consumers all around the world. Cow's milk is one of the most commonly consumed food items in the United States. According to statistics, in 2020, up to 92% of households in this country have drunk cow's milk, and 69% of them use cow's milk for drinking and food every day. As of 2022, there are 33,948 dairy farms in the United States, a decrease of 1,813 compared to 2021. People's demand for cow's milk is decreasing, and the amount of milk produced is always more than demand, and these are the main reasons why dairy farms have to close. Currently, there are 7 different breeds of dairy cows raised across the country, in which Holstein is the most raised dairy breed, with about 8.1 million heads, accounting for 89% of the total dairy herd in the United States. In addition, the Jersey is the second most raised dairy breed in the country, at about 7%. According to the USDA statistics, each year about 9.1 million dairy calves are born across the country, and 5.7% of them are stillborn or die within the first 48 hours after birth. In particular, all male dairy calves will be sold to beef farms, and they will be slaughtered after about 13 to 14 months of age. Raising a male calf for several weeks will also cost ranchers additional costs. Therefore, the most logical solution is to sell them immediately after birth. On some small farms, male dairy calves will be shot dead before slaughter. This is considered a humanitarian measure. After about 20 days from birth, breeders will start tagging the milk calves. Currently, most of the farms in the world attach ear tags to dairy calves at this stage. This worker is preparing milk for the calves to drink. Within 24 hours from birth, all dairy calves will be separated from their mothers. This is considered a dairy industry standard. It also helps prevent infection in calves from exposure to contaminated feces. At 1 month of age, each dairy calf needs about 1.2 gallons of milk per day. This amount of milk is equivalent to 15% of their body weight. To get calves into the habit of docile self-drinking, it usually takes about the first 3 to 5 days for farm owners to get them used to bottle feeding. This is also the hardest time for workers on dairy farms in the United States. On some dairy farms that are small and have pasture for grazing, calves can live with their mothers until weaning. Dairy cows are considered fully mature when they reach 15 to 19 months of age. At this point, the average weight of a dairy cow is about 1,200 to 1,600 pounds, depending on the breed. This is the process of harvesting silage corn near a dairy farm in Tulare County, California. Currently, California is the state with the largest number of dairy cows in the country, with about 1.72 million cows. The next places are Wisconsin with 1.2 million and Idaho with 635,000. According to USDA statistics, each year, dairy farms in the United States consume about 18% of domestically produced silage, which is equivalent to 23 million tons of silage. For many years now, Wisconsin has always been the largest producer of corn silage in the country, with about 23 million tons, twice the amount of corn produced in California. After about 3 weeks from harvest, millions of tons of corn silage at this farm have been used to feed dairy cows. A mature dairy cow typically eats about 30 pounds of baled hay and grain per day. In addition, about 20 pounds of silage is also consumed by them each day. This is the cleaning process at a dairy farm in Idaho. If you were there, would you be willing to do this job? The workers working at this farm will clean the ground about every 3 days. Tens of tons of cow manure will be transferred to wastewater treatment tanks before being discharged into the environment or used to fertilize fields. In 2021, there are 425 dairy farms in Idaho, with a total herd of 635,000 heads. Here's what's going on at a dairy farm in Texas. The workers here are moving bales of dry straw to inside of the farm to cover the floor. For dairy farms that are small, but do not have a grazing area. This method will be used to keep the floor of the barn dry. Currently, in Texas, there are 351 dairy farms, with a total herd of about 595,000 cows. This is a dairy farm in Florida. The dairy cows on this farm are considered the happiest dairy cows in the United States. This rancher hired a band to come to his farm and play jazz music to relax his dairy cows. These dairy cows showed great interest in the musicians playing, and they did not hesitate to approach the concert area. Currently, in Florida, there are only about 50 dairy farms and 127,000 cows. Next, we will go to the milking centres to see how the milking process for thousands of cows takes place. One by one, the dairy cows will move into their positions for the workers to milk. Seen from this position, they look like spectators preparing to enjoy a football match. Before milking takes place, these workers clean and disinfect the cow's udders. Next, these devices will be fitted to the udders of the dairy cows to initiate the milking process. Milking for each cow will be done within 5 to 7 minutes. With more than 9 million dairy cows being raised, milk production in 2021 in the United States is 221 billion pounds, and the total revenue from the dairy industry is about $46 billion.